I understand you preach very well.
Well, I try to say what God has asked me to say.
Good. Okay, so let's get to our discussion. It's about 40 minutes after 9 o'clock. First, let's hear from you. You've been behind this whole concept about protect LRB votes. And of course, sometimes last week again, I'm sure I hosted you. We talk about that. But first, let me get your feelings about the outcome of the November 14th run of elections.
So that's a deep question, and because my feeling is one of pride, one of joy, one of great satisfaction. And it's not about who won. It's about how we as Liberians conducted ourselves and how we have been able to ensure that our democracy is strengthened. That's what this is about. And so as a Liberian, I'm proud. I'm proud of the way we comported ourselves and how we disappointed the enemy.
Okay.
Disappointed the enemy because we didn't go down into chaos. We didn't spiral downward into conflict. And as you know, these are things I've been speaking about from the beginning, strengthening our democracy. So I'm a proud Liberian today.
You're a proud Liberian today. Now, let me take you back. This whole issue of this concept of protecting LRB votes, it's very unprecedented in our country's politics. I didn't hear about that before. It didn't exist until when you came to the limelight and you started propelling this. What's the reason, in fact, behind this call to action?
So I've shared a couple of times that when you have had the experiences I've had, having been the head of the UN development system in countries, having been the lead in supporting governments for elections and so forth, when you've had that experience and you've been the one who was on the front line with the Gambia elections in 2016, the elections that were contested between President Barrow and then President Yahya Jammeh. And you've seen some of the things that can occur in elections, especially in Africa. You come from that experience wanting to make sure that you add value, you improve what you have in your own country. And so for me, that was something that when I reached out to all the parties in July, in fact August 1, I think I sent the letter. When I reached out to all the parties asking for us to come together to protect and safeguard the votes of the Liberian people, it came from that background. And not all the parties responded. Some didn't respond, some didn't participate. But I felt it was important for us as Liberians to take responsibility for strengthening our democracy, strengthening our electoral system and so forth, and not just sitting and relying on NEC or relying on the government. And so the idea for me was to make sure that we had additional safeguards, additional measures, and that citizens get involved, and that people get involved in protecting the votes. And so, again, that's another sense of pride for me because I can see that innovation has added value.
Okay. Now, I want to speak to this. Should I refer to you as ambassador? Once an ambassador, always an ambassador. But people might be wondering, since you came from the UN and the international circle, in fact, from a very high level, that maybe you knew something and you were sent to help, unseat the incumbent from that angle of the international community. What do you say?
The number of conspiracy theories that exist around me entering Liberian politics is plenty. Some people say I was sent by international community. Some people say I was sent by our former president. All kinds of rumors and so forth. And at the end of the day, coming into the political space, I came into it because I feel very strongly about nation building, and I feel very strongly that the experiences I have had in other countries, that I need to lend those experiences to help to strengthen our own country.
Okay.
And I didn't want my legacy to be that the critical years of my productive life were used helping other countries and not my own. So I wasn't sensed by anyone, and the idea of me initiating this call to action for protect the vote, it wasn't anybody's prompting, and it wasn't about unseating. It wasn't about somebody sending me to unseat President Weah, but it was about how I felt we should be directing the country. It's about how I felt I can add value. It's about how I felt that very strongly that we should offer the Liberian people alternatives and so forth. And so I joined from that perspective, wanting to be key to our transformation, wanting to be key to the transformational agenda of Liberia. And I've joined it. I've always said, Sorbor, that I didn't join it because I was after position and power. I had global position. I had global power. So it wasn't about that. It was about the process and the people. And I've demonstrated that throughout the campaigning. You go and check my messages and so forth, will be consistent. It's about the process and the people. And so all I did, even with initiating the Protect LIB votes, initiating Protect the votes and the call to action, all of that was about me impacting the process. I met a former candidate on Saturday morning, and he said to me, "You brought wisdom into our politics." And I'll give credit to himself, candidate Wapo. He said he brought wisdom into our politics, and I appreciated that, because entering into the politics for me was not about I must be this, I must have this power, this position. No, it was about how do I add value and how do I contribute. And so that's what this has been about. It wasn't about, an agenda that somebody had to unseat President. Yeah, of course I ran because I wanted to win. I wanted to win. And yes, but it wasn't an agenda of somebody else's that I was carrying forward. No.
Now, let me just add this. Before you came, before you made up the decision to come to contest the elections, did you hold consultations with those individuals you were working with or the institution you worked with before?
Yes, I did.
You did?
I did tell them that I wanted to take early retirement. I did tell them why. And they felt very strongly that the more people in the system who've been given, increased capacity, who've been empowered and so forth, and so they can go back to their countries, especially the countries that are fragile, the countries that are vulnerable, if they can go back and help, it's an achievement for the United Nations. And so I was definitely for sure supported and encouraged. There were those who didn't want me to leave. There were those who told me that, we're looking at you for, future Deputy Secretary General, future Secretary General. We don't want you to leave. You're one of the talented we have on the continent and so forth. But I felt that as a Liberian, I wanted my legacy to be that all that I learned, I used it in Liberia. And so for me, it was a clear decision. And I have been asked to come back, by the way.
You've been asked?
I've been asked to come back. July 18th. My early retirement was June 30th, and July 18th, I received a message saying, "We know that you've just retired, but you came highly recommended for us to ask you, would you reconsider coming back for this Assistant Secretary General position?" I declined at that time. And then this past week, I was contacted. I have a meeting tomorrow where I've been asked to come back to reconsider.
You have to go back and serve the people.
Yeah, we'll have the discussions tomorrow. But my vision is making sure that all of us put our hands together to transform Liberia. This country has to be what it was birthed to be. This country will be great. It will rise again. And I want history to judge us that when we had the opportunity, we helped for that rising.
Okay. And when you held a meeting, because I'm still trying to allow you to clear the air, when you held the consultation with your people, did they, after they give you the blessings, well, you can go, did they also give you cash that you can use to do your campaign, all of that?
No, it doesn't work like that.
Okay.
The United Nations doesn't work like that. There's so many wrong perceptions about how the UN work, but it doesn't work like that at all.
Okay.
And I'm actually glad that it doesn't work like that, because it stands as a model. The United Nations stands as a model of good governance, of good leadership, and so forth. And I am really glad I had the opportunity to serve the countries that I served,
Good.
and I had the opportunity to serve with to serve as the representative of Antonio Guterres, as his representative in different countries, and to work with Amina Mohammed as my direct supervisor on a day-to-day basis. And I learned so much from the leadership of the UN. I learned so much,
Okay.
and I hope to be able to use that continually for Liberia.
Okay. Now, you're listening to the Super Money Show, right to the ELBC 99.9 and also frequencies across Liberia. Our studio guest is the head of the African Liberation League, Madam Sara Beysolow Nyanti. She's here as our guest, but let me ask you this question, Madam Nyanti. Liberia has a president-elect now. You can clearly be called the mother of protect the votes in Liberia. So, can you share in the victory, especially being called as the mother of protecting the votes? Can you share in the victory?
Most definitely.
Okay.
And I love the title of Mother of Protect the Votes, because even when some didn't believe in the call to action to protect the votes, some dropped at the wayside, some didn't want to participate, and so forth. I'm glad it took root amongst the citizens.
Okay.
And everybody started talking about protect the votes, protect the votes, protect the votes. And every time I hear people talking about it, I smile, because I realize that innovation has taken root. And what I wanted for the Protect the Votes call to action was it will become a citizens movement. And we're here last week with some citizens, some street vendors, people who are involved with at-risk youth and so forth. It became something that everybody was talking about. Now everybody's talking about Protect the Votes. Although some people are using it wrongly, people started using it from the perspective of violence and so forth. But actually, the concept and the call to action that I did was about us as Liberians getting involved, and that's what happened. That's what happened. And for me, being called the Mother of Protect the Votes, in fact, that's a title. I think I'll put it on my card, Mother of Protect the Votes. But I do feel such joy that citizens got involved in that, and I do hope, as I said last week, Sorbor, that I do hope that it's something that we all own and take forward. And I've now coined as Protect LIB Votes, and hopefully it will continue as a citizens movement. There are elections to come. This is not about an event. It's about us strengthening our processes to make sure that this country becomes a developed country. This country must become a developed country, and our elections are critical to our development.
There are people who believe that the broadcast team implemented your concept. They took it and ran with it rather. How do you rate their implementation of the concept?
I rated 100%. They did exactly what we intended to do. I mean, the plan we had as a collective, the vision we had as a collective, they implemented it to the letter, and it was superb. And I laud them. I met Saturday morning. I met Amakon, and I was telling him thank you. He was telling me thank you, and it's for me. The more we can grow as a people, and the more we can grow our systems, the stronger Liberia will be, and the better our future for our children will be. And so I congratulate the boycott team for how they implemented the vision. And initially, it was intended to be a collective for all of us implemented it together. But the fact that they implemented it and they did such a superb job of doing that, that's fantastic. And we complemented. We didn't stay by the wayside. We continued, and we complemented with the advocacy. We're on this station. We're on Truth. We're on different platforms. We're in communities, and we also did voters education by animation. We spread it all out there, and we're at the polling centers. So it was a complementary effort, and together all of us have seen the results. And I want to use this opportunity to say that President George Weah has gained such respect.
Wow.
He's gained such respect for the level of patriotism, love for country, and maturity he demonstrated with his concession, and he has been lauded for it across across the continent, and I'm really happy he's getting his flowers, because what he did is what Liberia needs. Liberia needs leaders who will see Liberia first.
Yes,
I've always been saying Liberia first, and so I want to thank President Weah for what he did, and encourage all of us to follow that lead that our president demonstrated. That it's not about you, and that's why I continue to work even after October 10th. I saw that, and I continue to say that October 10th was an event, but this is not about an event. It's about a process. It's a process we must continue to strengthen until we reach that place of full development in Liberia. So I want to congratulate him and thank him, and call upon all of us to continue to look at Liberia as this baby that must be nurtured. She's 176 years old, but she's fragile and she's vulnerable. She's been through so many wars and crises, and so we have to hold Liberia like a chicken egg and work to develop Liberia and ensure that our children, our children's children, can live in a developed country.
Now, considering or given your tremendous capacity and your experiences as well, Madam Sara Nyanti, were you working the new government?
If I'm called to serve, well, I just told you I've been called to serve again in the UN.
Yeah, in the UN. So, yeah, surely.
So, all options are out there for me, but definitely for sure, my priority will always be Liberia.
Okay.
My priority will always be Liberia.
So, in another word, if you were called to serve by the president-elect, you will accept the offer.
For sure. For sure.
You disregard the offer coming from the UN?
Yes, no. Liberia first. You know, I say Liberia first. It's not only some kind of halfway. Liberia first all the way. But you should recall that I was considered as a running mate for the president-elect. And so the president-elect and I do have a good relationship, and I can say that he and I have spoken since his win.
You were asked to serve as a running mate for him before?
There were conversations held.
Okay, conversations held. Okay. Now, so which of the area you think, especially given your experience and tremendous capacity, which area you think you want him to call you to serve?
So let me say this. I think first and foremost, the idea of service, public service, should really be about who has the best to offer. And it should be about capacity and competencies. And we've seen in our history where we've had people serving in functions that they had no experience in, serving in functions that they had no exposure to, no knowledge of, and that doesn't help the country. And so where my experiences and where my capacity will lend itself is where, I'll be willing to serve. My experience.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
Oh, so
already been a face of Liberia outside there, working with the UN. We want to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs, maybe.
So let me say this. When it comes to diplomacy, I've done representation. I've represented the Secretary General of the UN to different countries. I've done geopolitical engagements. I've worked with the U.S. Congress and others on the situation in Yemen. I've worked on sub-regional issues and regional issues, continental issues, and so forth. So those engagements have been there, and yes, I have experiences as it relates to diplomacy, but I also have experiences as it relates to management, strong management experience, strong development planning experience. I have very strong experience in terms of leading teams and coordination and so forth. So and then when it comes to financial management, I've managed over $1 billion a year, more than the Liberian government's budget.
Okay.
So wherever I'm called to serve, as long as my experiences match that area, I will be willing to serve.
Ministry of Finance?
But
I'm just asking.
How you just calling ministry? So first and foremost, I think let's all just wish the president-elect well and hope that he will learn from some of the mistakes we've made in history, and by making sure that we don't look at the setting up of government from the perspective of patronage, but more so from the perspective of capacity, competency, experience, so that you put the right people in the right place. You don't want square pegs in round holes. You want people who fit into the functions, and I think that's a task that he has ahead of him. but it's incumbent upon all of us to help him, to make sure, all of us, and I say all of us, Liberians as well, let's help him in making sure that we continue to grow and improve on our governance, and make sure that good governance is anchored in human rights and so forth, and making sure that the right people are in the right place.
Let me ask you, did you make any, or have you in any way planned supporting the President Weah's administration? Did you ever contact him before? Have you met President Weah before?
I've met President Weah, and I met him. I've only had one meeting with President Weah, which happened after October 10th. And that meeting,
after the October 10 election,
yes, okay. It was about protect the LIB votes. It was just making sure that he understood it, making sure he's aware of it, and making sure, and asking him to engage in supporting it, because it was for all of us to want to have the best elections, most fair, transparent, credible elections we could have. So I wanted to make sure he understood it and make sure he was aware of it. And I met him with another opposition leader who was part of the Protect the Votes initiative, and other than that, no, I was never asked to serve the Weah administration. I was never asked for engagement from the Weah administration, and but that's fine too. I mean, there were so many people supporting President Weah, and they did the best that they could do.
In your last press conference, Madam Ambassador, again, let me put it that way. In your last press conference on Friday morning, you spoke about this post-election peace and stability. We held our own in this regard. And from your experience in other countries, what will you say is our prognosis? What lies ahead of us, you think?
One thing that is certain is that you cannot have sustainable development without sustainable peace. Okay. And the fact that we have been able to sustain our peace through these elections, and let me say these elections were critical. Liberians, we've done a great job. This is the first time we've had the responsibility to manage our own elections in terms of funding, manage our own elections in terms of security, and manage our own elections in terms of the technical expertise and so forth. We did an extremely good job as Liberians, and the call that I had on Friday, the call to action that I made on Friday, was for all of us to continue to operate in peace, continue to move in peace, and continue to work in a way that will demonstrate our maturity and our readiness for taking Liberia forward. And we did that. So with that peace that we've seen with the post-elections, we don't have post-election violence. We didn't fall down into that trap. With what we've seen, I think the future is bright for Liberia. What we've seen with the leadership demonstrated by President Weah with this concession, and what we've seen from President-elect Boyka, who's sending the message out for unity and bringing us together. And that's been my call from the time I entered into this space. I've been talking about the need for us to unite, to reconcile, to heal, because Liberia, we need all Liberians or no Liberia. All Liberians need space for us to be able to work together to build this country. And so my prognosis is one that's good. I think we've seen over the last few weeks, we've definitely seen us taking a turn in the right direction as a country. And I call upon all sides. I call upon those who supported President Weah, those who supported President Boyka, to tone down the rhetoric, tone down the language, and remember that we're all Liberians. We all got to coexist for the 3,000 square miles. Surely. And so some of us got nowhere else to go but this Liberia. And so we all must make Liberia fit for our growth and our development. So I'm excited for Liberia. I'm excited with what we've done. We're the oldest republic on the continent, and we've demonstrated leadership by what just happened in last week. President Weah and President-elect Joseph Boyka have shown to Africa and to the world that Liberia is the Liberia that it used to be. Sure. And Liberia will rise again. This is the same Liberia that was the one responsible for helping so many countries gain their independence. This is the same Liberia that was the one. I worked in South Sudan. There's so many South Sudanese who credit Liberia for supporting supporting their independence, and credited Liberia for supporting them from 1955 to 1972. So many South Sudanese came to Liberia for education. President Tubman himself brought them here as a way of demonstrating our leadership on the continent. We've led this continent in several ways. We were signatories to the League of Nations, signatory to the United Nations. There were meetings in Lofa for establishing the Organization of African Unity. Okay. This is as in Liberia, and it must regain its prominence in Africa. Liberia must regain her prominence in the world. And so I'm excited for what Liberia will be. And I want to live to see the transformation that we're talking about, this transformational agenda for Liberia. I know we can do it, but we have to do it together. Everybody must come together and work together and realize that governance is not about a party puts forth an agenda, and a party competes, and a party gets to lead, but you're leading all Liberians.
Surely.
You're not leading some Liberians. And leadership is about everybody, and all of us have to agree to be led in the direction that takes Liberia to development.
I see you were just adding to the monologue that I did this morning. What's your final message so I can take leave of you? I know you got some meetings to go to.
My final message this morning is to congratulate all of us again as Liberians and say to Liberia, this is the Liberia we recognize, the Liberia that takes leadership and takes responsibility, the Liberia that decides that we want to be the best and we will be the best. You know, there's another country in our sub-region that says we are the best. But truly, indeed, we can take that place of being the best if we all decide to work together, put our hands together. Developing Liberia is not for a person. It's not for the president-elect or the vice president-elect. It's for all of us. All of us have to play our part. All of us have to contribute, and it starts with us being ready to transform Liberia, transform our thinking, transform our attitude and our behaviors, and make sure that we work in a way that's positive, that contributes to Liberia's success.
Okay, she's Madam Sara Beysolow Nyanti. She's the head of the African Liberation League. She's been my guest on the SMS. I'm sure she's about to leave now. She has some meetings to go to. It's just how I took my exit. I know my producer will begin taking the calls. Until then, Sorbor George is my name. Have a pleasant day.